Allah is the one, the one, the one, the one.
بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. So we mentioned the first of those points that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned in this hadith. Three things that if you have them, you taste the sweetness of faith. Number one was loving Allah and loving the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam more than everything, more than anything and everything. What does that mean, more than anything and everything? What does it mean when you love something more than anything else? Right? This concept of love, loving Allah, loving the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's a concept and a comment that is often made by us as Muslims. Right? All across the world, any country that you go to, any Muslim that you meet, any Muslim that you come into contact with, they will always say that they love Allah and they love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? That's just something which is granted. And it is a given. And we're all familiar with the hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ in which he said, none of you truly believe until I am more beloved to them than their parents and their children and all of the people. These are hadith all known, right? They're famous hadith and we all know them. And we all make that claim, myself included, we all make this claim. And it is a claim that is easy to make. It is a claim that we often make. But what we have to ask ourselves is if it is a claim that is true, if it is something that we actually do. What does it mean when you love something more than anything else? The concept of love embodies many things. Right? And one of the main things that it embodies is that if you love someone more than something else, you're willing to sacrifice for them. You're willing to do anything for that love. So a parent loves their child. And they will often sacrifice so much for their children, sacrifices that they wouldn't make for anyone else. And for those of you that are parents, you will understand this. For those of you that are not, inshallah, one day you will understand this. But the point is that you often sacrifice for your children. So if you're a parent, right, you're a father, you're a mother, you have a young child, that child stays awake all night crying. All they do is cry. You're not going to hurt the child, you're not going to shout at the child, you're not going to harm the child. Why? Because the child is a child, it's a baby, he's crying, doesn't know any better. You will change your routine to help the child. You'll stay awake, even though you have to go to work in the morning. You spend your night awake, you pick up the child, you rock the child, you walk with the child, you feed the child. You spend your whole night, your whole routine now changes because of the child, right? Because of the baby. Everything in your life has to change now because of this baby. And that is the sacrifice that you make. You're willing to make sacrifices for that baby and for that child and for your family. You make sacrifices for your friends. You make sacrifices for your spouses. You make sacrifices for many, many things. And that is a sign of love. So when Allah Azza wa Jalla says to us that Allah and His Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam should be more beloved to us than everything else, what does it mean? It means that our sacrifice for Allah and for the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam should also be greater than our sacrifices for everything else. Our sacrifices should be greater. So when Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us that we have to wake up for Fajr in the morning, He tells us we have to wake up, right? And now it's not too bad because it's still the winter. I don't know what time you guys pray Fajr in the summer. If it gets really early, like the UK, Fajr is like 3 o'clock in the morning, 3 a.m. That's what time we pray Fajr. So now in Ramadan, we fast from 3 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. That's like fasting in Ramadan because Ramadan is now in the summer. That is the sacrifice that we make and we willingly make. We want to make it. Because as we just discussed, loving Allah, all of His blessings, all of His favors, all of His forgiveness, all of His patience, all of this demands that we make sacrifices also for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So likewise, loving the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And knowing when you know something, when you know someone or something, it makes you better able to sacrifice for them. That's why it's so important to learn about Allah, learn about His names and attributes, and it's so important to learn about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you haven't yet studied his seerah and his life, you need to do so. My good friend Shaykh Qadi, he has I think over 100 videos on YouTube. He went through the whole life in so much detail. It's probably the most detailed in English language, the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. 100 lectures, video lectures that you can watch. So much detail. But that's what we should do. We should dedicate our lives to learning about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because when you learn about something, the more you learn, the more you love it. That's also human nature. Right? If I was to ask all of us here in this room, from all of the people that are living, the people that we know in our lives, who do you love the most? Who would you tell me? Who do you love the most? Not from the living people.
Parents.
Parents, sons, children, spouses. Right? No one said their husbands or wives. But these are the people that you often say that you love the most. Why do you love them the most? Are your children the best children in all of the world?
No.
Are they the greatest humans in the whole world? Are your parents the best parents in the whole world? Are your husbands or wives the best people in the whole world? No, not necessarily. But why do we love them more than other people? Why do you love your children more than you love me? I came all the way from the UK to be here. And still you love your children more than, why? Because it's human nature that you love those people that you know best. And the people that you know best in your lives are your parents, your spouses, your children. Your love for them is greater. Right? You know your children, you know your parents, you know your family, your brothers, your sisters, you know them better than anyone else. You can say things to them that no one else can say. You can deal with them in ways that no one else can deal. They will be patient with you in ways that they will not be patient with other people, because you know them so well. Right? Many of us, we're very patriotic to our countries. Right? We love our countries. We love the lands that we come from. Why? Because they're the lands that we know best. Are our countries the best countries in the world? No, not necessarily. There's probably countries that are far better in many other ways. But still, we love our countries more. Why? Because we're so familiar with those countries, right? Our food, we love, right? Is it the best food? Maybe, maybe not.
Yes.
Don't go there.
But not always. So, but it is because we are so familiar. See? So the Pakistani community loves Pakistani food. The Chinese love Chinese food. Everyone loves their own food. Why? Because for them it is the most food. That is human nature. The more you get to know something, the more you learn, the more you love. And that is also a test of love. You see, if you have a hobby and a passion, you love cars, you love traveling, you love, I don't know, whatever, computer games, whatever you love, you read and learn more about it yourself. If you're someone that loves cars, you will buy car magazines, you will go on websites, you will watch TV programs, document everything. If you love nature, the same. If you love, I don't know, food and cooking, the same. That is human nature. The more you love, the more you want to learn. So if we truly love Allah and the Prophet ﷺ, we have to ask this question: do we truly love them if we don't want to learn more? If we're not inspired and encouraged to learn more? That is a test of whether the claim that we make is true or not. Because if we love cars and cooking and traveling and all these things, and we learn more because we love it, then how come when it comes to loving Allah and loving the Prophet ﷺ, their love is supposed to be far better, far greater, far stronger, but still we don't learn? It shows that there is a problem there, right? There is something that is missing within that equation. So we need to spend more time learning about Allah, learning about the Prophet ﷺ. By reading the Quran is the most amazing source of information that you can find in these two things. How many times does Allah speak about Himself? Speak about His names, His powers, His attributes? How many times in the Quran are we told about the life of the Prophet ﷺ? The stories that took place, the incidents, the battles, all of these different things are mentioned there in the Quran. So when we come across them, it's not just about reading in Arabic or reading the translation in English or Urdu or another language. It is about actually learning, wanting to study more, wanting to learn more, not just for ourselves, but for our children as well. This is how we get our, often I get this question: how do we get our children to love Allah more, love the Prophet ﷺ more? The answer is, again, that we need to teach them more. It's not just something which is automatic, it doesn't just come like that. If you don't know anything about someone, your love is always superficial. You don't know, right? Because it's very distant. But the more you get to know something about someone, the more you learn about them, the more stronger that your love becomes for them as well. And there is no one greater from all of the creation of Allah than our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah Azza wa Jal, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he has a narration in which he says that when Allah Azza wa Jal, before creation, He chose the best, purest, noblest heart to be the heart of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He is the greatest of all of Allah's creation. Allah chose him and He gave him a place above every other prophet, every other messenger, even Jibreel alayhi salam. Jibreel, as we know, is the archangel. He is in charge of all of the angels of the heavens. In the night journey, in the Isra Mi'raj, there came a point when Jibreel alayhi salam said to the Prophet sallam, I can't go any further. Only you now can go alone. Meaning what? Meaning that even Jibreel alayhi salam has a point that he cannot go beyond. But our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went above and beyond that point. Right? He is the one who Allah Azza wa Jal chose, and He gave him that special position. And that is our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. From the greatest blessings of Allah upon us, right? We spoke about Allah's blessings in the last lecture. The greatest blessings is that we are from the ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're from the followers of this Prophet. We are from his ummah. Right? We will be his followers, because his ummah and his followers will be the first ones to enter into paradise. May Allah make us from amongst those people. We will be, inshaAllah, from the first people to enter into paradise, before the nations of Ibrahim and Musa and Isa and Nuh and all of those other prophets. Even though they came before us chronologically, they were here before us, they did all this before us. But this ummah, even though it is last in the life on earth, it will be the first on the Day of Judgment. And that is from the honor that Allah gave to our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So why do we love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Number one, we love him because of his character. There is no person that you will ever read about, come across, in terms of their character, in terms of their attributes, in terms of their mannerisms, that was greater and better than our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Amazing in every way. Every single characteristic that you can think of that is good: hospitality, generosity, patience, mercy, forgiveness. All of these many attributes that sometimes we can only hope for and aspire to, because they are so hard to achieve, the Prophet ﷺ not only had, but he excelled in them as well. He was someone who had everything. The Prophet ﷺ could deal with everyone, and he could have character with everyone. And the Prophet ﷺ in many ahadith, even Allah Azza wa Jalla in the Quran, how does he describe the Prophet ﷺ? وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَىٰ خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. You are upon the greatest and most noble of character. The Prophet ﷺ is being praised by Allah that you have the greatest and most noble of character. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, when he came to show how important it is, this issue of character, he said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I was only sent to you to perfect your character. Your character. Why? Because your worship with Allah is part of your character. Your relationship with your parents, with your spouses, with your neighbors, with your friends, with the people in your communities, in your societies, it is all from that character. How do you behave when you're angry? How do you behave when you're happy? How do you walk? How do you sit? How do you talk? All of this comes into personality, it comes into the issue of character. And the Prophet ﷺ displayed this in every single regard. You know, there are whole books that are written, books of hadith, they are called Shama'i. Shama'i means the description of the Prophet ﷺ. All the ahadith that describe him, the way he spoke, the way he walked, the way he talked, the way he looked, the way he dressed, what he liked, what he didn't like, all of this description, all of these hadith, the scholars put them into a single book. They are called the books of Shama'i. And they speak about the character, the description of the Prophet ﷺ. Hundreds of hadith. One of the most famous is Shama'i by Imam al-Tirmidhi. Imam al-Tirmidhi is one of the famous scholars of hadith. He has a book that has over 300 hadith only about description of the Prophet ﷺ. How he slept, everything, the way that he was ﷺ. And that is why we love him, because of that amazing character. It's human nature. You love people that have amazing character. You know, sometimes you hear a story about someone and you love them just because of their character. You never met them, you never spoke to them, you don't know anything about them. But you just hear that they're so amazing, they're so generous, they did so much in their communities. Or even today in the world, when you think about leading figures, the most famous personalities in the world and the good that they did for their communities, how they stood up against oppression, how they stood for justice, all of these things that you hear about, and you love them. Why? You love them because you hear about their personalities and their character. You don't necessarily meet them, you don't necessarily know them, but you remember them and you love them because of what you hear about their stories, about their character, and about their personalities. Likewise, we love the Prophet ﷺ. And we love the Prophet ﷺ because he had this amazing character. Another reason why we love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We love him because of his favors upon us. He did a lot for us. Everything that we have in our religion, it is because of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by Allah's permission. It is because of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the message that he brought to us. There is today in 2018, Hong Kong, UK, USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, all across the world, we know our religion, we know Allah, we know the meaning of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, we know the Quran, all of this because of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it is from his favors upon us that he gave us all of this knowledge, that he taught, that he spent his time teaching, that he wanted us to learn about Allah and about the Quran and about his own example sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is from the many favors that he has upon us that we love him as well. We wouldn't know Islam if the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam hadn't taught us about Islam. We wouldn't know the meaning of La ilaha illallah if he hadn't taught us the meaning of La ilaha illallah. We wouldn't know how to pray, we wouldn't know how to make wudu, we wouldn't know how to perform hajj, we wouldn't know how to fast. All of these things that are a part of our religion, we only know because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us. And that is from the favors that he has upon us, the good that he did for us, the knowledge that he gave to us, and we have learned that knowledge. And it's amazing because that knowledge goes back over 1400 years, 1400 years that knowledge goes back to, and we still learn from what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught his companions over 1400 years ago. Another reason why we love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and one of the greatest reasons, is because of the sacrifices that he made for us. Can you imagine how much pain, how much hurt, how much difficulty and hardship, how many trials and tribulations the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went through, just so that people will know the meaning of La ilaha illallah. From the very first moment that the Prophet ﷺ called to Islam, the very first time, he was attacked. So it wasn't something which happened maybe 6 months later, 2 years later, 5 years later. The very first time, when the Prophet ﷺ stood on the mountain of Safa, and he gathered all of the Quraysh, all of his family, all of his tribespeople, his uncles, all of them. He called them people, the people of Mecca, he brought them together. And he told them about Islam. And he called them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What did they say? His own family member, Abu Lahab, his uncle, was the first one to stand up and say, may you be destroyed. Tabban lak. May you be destroyed. Is this why you gathered us? Abu Lahab would walk. This is his own uncle, his father's brother. His uncle, the one that's supposed to be protecting him, looking after him, helping him, supporting him. His own uncle, when the Prophet ﷺ would walk around in the streets of Mecca calling people to Islam, he would walk behind him, and what would he say? Don't listen to him, he's crazy. Don't listen to him, he's mad. Don't listen to him, he's not talking sense. His own uncle would do this. His aunt, Abu Lahab's wife, his aunt, she would go in the morning, she used to gather wood, and she would bring wood together. She would take the nails from the wood and the splinters of the wood, and she would put it in front of the doorstep of the Prophet ﷺ. Because there's no street lights, there's no electricity, so when he walks out in the dark, what does he step on? He steps on wood, and he steps on nails. She would try to harm him from walking, and that's why Allah Azza wa Jalla in Surah Lahab, Tabbat yada Abi Lahabin wa tab, he speaks about Abu Lahab and his wife, and the harm that they did to the Prophet ﷺ. This is the very first time that he is calling to Islam, and from that moment on, for the next 23 odd years, the Prophet ﷺ has to make sacrifice after sacrifice after sacrifice. And he's going through hardship. How many of the companions were harmed? How many of them were killed and murdered? How many of them were tortured and persecuted? A time came in Mecca that things became so hard, so difficult, that the Prophet ﷺ said to the companions, leave, go somewhere else. This is before Medina. He let them go to Abyssinia. Abyssinia is in Africa, extremely far away. It's not a land that you just, it's not Medina, which is still relatively close. It's at least still in the same land. This is in East Africa they have to go. And they traveled and they fled because they couldn't practice Islam in Mecca. They couldn't practice their own religion. The Prophet ﷺ walked by at the beginning of Islam. He walked by Ammar and Yasir and Sumayya, right? The first martyrs of Islam. Yasir and Sumayya. And they were being killed and tortured. And all the Prophet ﷺ could say to them is Sabran ala Yasir, inna maw'idakum al-jannah. Be patient, O family of Yasir, and you will have you have been promised paradise. That's all he could do. Couldn't help them, couldn't say anything, couldn't do anything. All he could say to them is be patient. The Prophet ﷺ, his whole family was boycotted. Right? It's known as the boycott of Abu Talib, Shi'r Abu Talib. Abu Talib is the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ, his family, the Muslims who were few in number, Abu Talib, all of his family, even the non-Muslims, those who didn't believe but they were related, close family to the Prophet ﷺ, for 2 or 3 years they suffered a boycott. Economic, political, social. They were told they had to go and live in one of the valleys of Mecca. Outside, couldn't go home, couldn't go to their houses, couldn't go. They had to live far away. For 2 or 3 years, the Quraysh hated them so much that they wrote a contract that the people of Mecca can't buy or sell to these people. You can't marry these people. You can't engage with them. You can't speak to them. Nothing. They're complete boycott. Not just socially, economically, every single way, you can't do anything. And to show how serious they were, they took the contract and they hung it up inside the Kaaba. Inside the Kaaba to show this is serious. We're not messing around, this is not a joke. They took it and they placed it inside of the Kaaba. The companions were so hungry that they would search on the ground for things to eat. No one is giving them food, no one is buying and selling. If traders came from outside of Mecca, business people with food and with items and so on, the Meccans would buy it for a higher price so that they can't sell it to the Muslims. They will say, we'll buy it, we'll double the price, give it to us. Don't sell it to them. And they're business people, right? These traders are business people, giving me more, like double the price, they would sell it to them. To such an extent that the few people that were feeling sympathy for the Muslims, they had to hide. And they had to sneak food in. Like one of the nephews of Khadija radiallahu anha, she was still alive at the time, her nephew would sneak food in, and just for her, he can't carry for all of the Muslims, what he could carry just for his aunt. Here is some food. And she would share it with everyone. Very little that would come. One of the men of Quraysh, he felt so sorry for the Muslims that all he could do was take a camel, put some food on the camel, and let it go free and hope that it wandered into the Muslim camp. Because he can't take it there. He can't go himself because there's a boycott. If he does it, then he will be boycotted as well. So much fear, so much difficulty. One of the Muslims, one of the companions, he said the times were so difficult. Now on one occasion, I left the camp to go to the bathroom. Right? There's no toilets, as you know. People used to go far out into the desert and they would relieve themselves. He goes, I went to the bathroom. And as I went and I started to pass urine, akramakumullah, he's there, relieving himself, he said that I heard something underneath me. The urine is falling under some type of thing. So when I looked, I found that it was the skin of an animal. Right? An animal, a dead animal, some skin is left there. He said, I took it and I washed it and I boiled it in water to make a soup. And I ate from it for 3 days. Because that's what they had. They didn't have anything. And it was only after 2 or 3 years later that some of the Quraysh felt this is so wrong. They became so upset with the oppression that it's carrying on. They thought that it would be only a few months or a few weeks, but it's going on to years now that they went and they broke the pact. Or in some narrations it said that Allah Azza wa Jal sent worms and it ate the contract that was in the Kaaba. It ate everything. And so Abu Talib came and he told the Quraysh the contract has been destroyed. And they said, if it has been so, then he said to them, if the contract has been destroyed, you let us go. If it hasn't been destroyed, you can take the Prophet ﷺ and do with him as you wish. And they went and they saw that the contract was destroyed and they lifted the boycott. But the point is that all of this, why? Look at all of these difficult sacrifices that the Muslims had to make, the Prophet ﷺ would have to make. And it doesn't just stop there. Then in Medina it's the same thing, the battles of Badr and Uhud and Ahzab and all of these, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, the conquest of Mecca, every single moment in the life of the Prophet ﷺ is a sacrifice. Why? Why did the Prophet ﷺ sacrifice so much? Why did he go through so much? It was for me and you. For us. When the Prophet ﷺ went to Taif, and the people of Taif stoned him, and they pelted him and they threw him away. Some narrations say that the Prophet ﷺ walked for many kilometers before he realized where he was. He was so upset and so distraught. He walked for many, many kilometers. And then Allah Azza wa Jalla sent to him the angels of the mountains. And the angel of the mountain said, O Messenger of Allah, O Muhammad, if you want me to crush these people between the mountains, I will destroy them. Because as you know, Mecca and Taif, it is mountainous region. I will crush them between the mountains. And I will destroy them. What did the Prophet ﷺ say? He said, no. Rather, I hope that from them and from their children will be those who will say, La ilaha illallah. That's what he wanted. That's what he wanted. For people to say, La ilaha illallah. When the Prophet ﷺ used to be beaten in Mecca, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu used to come and he would say, أَتَقْتُلُونَ رَجُلًا أَن يَقُولَ رَبِّيَ اللَّهِ. Do you kill him and fight him because he says, Allah is my Lord? That's all he says. He doesn't want your money. He doesn't want anything. All he wants you to do is know that you should worship Allah. When the Quraysh became upset with the Muslims and with the Prophet ﷺ, they sent to him a man, an ambassador, one of the nobles of Quraysh, to go and speak to him. And this man, he came, his name was Abu Walid. He came and he sat with the Prophet ﷺ. He's a non-Muslim from Quraysh, their leaders. And he said, Oh Muhammad, tell me what you want. If it's money, we will make you the richest man in Arabia. All of us will give you our money. And if you don't want money, but you want, for example, you're ill, there's illness that you have, we'll find you the best doctor in all of Arabia. And if you want power, we will make you the single, strongest, most powerful man in Quraysh. We won't do anything unless you allow it. We will ask you for the decision. Whatever you want, just tell us, and we'll do it, but stop preaching Islam. What did the Prophet ﷺ say in response? He read to him Quran. Surah Fussilat. He starts to read to him Quran. Why? Because he wants him to know that he doesn't want money, he doesn't want power, he doesn't want fame or wealth. He wants them to worship Allah. He wants them to know that all of these idols that they're worshipping besides Allah don't make sense. It doesn't make sense. The Quraysh, the Arabs, they were poor people, right? They were not rich and wealthy. The idols were not made from gold and silver. They were made many times from food. From dates, from barley, from wheat, from dry food. They would have, because that's all they can afford, and they would shape and mold the idols with their own hands from these foods. But then when drought and famine came and they were hungry, starving, they would take that same idol and they would eat it. Because otherwise they'll die, they don't have any food. But it still wouldn't make them think, it doesn't make sense. How can I do this? So the Prophet ﷺ wanted them to understand it. And he wanted to call them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he wanted them to understand Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ, all of this, that he goes through all of his sacrifices, is so that people will know the meaning of La ilaha illallah. And the Prophet ﷺ prophesied this. He prophesied, he told us that a time will come when Islam will spread all over the world. All over the world. And this is something which we can see today. Right? Every more or less, and alhamdulillah, I've traveled to many countries and been to many parts of the world. Very rarely, if any, is there a country except that there are groups of Muslims there. Go to Iceland, there's Muslims. Go to Alaska, there are Muslims. Go to Hawaii, there are Muslims. Go all over the world. When I was in Medina University, one of the beauties of going to that university is they have students from all across the world. Places that I never heard of, right? Countries that I never knew existed. And countries that I thought that they would never be Muslims there. We had students from South Korea, we had students from Brazil, from Argentina, from Uruguay, from countries like the Comoros Islands that I never even heard of, I didn't even know what they were. All of these different parts of the world, and they've all come together. Mozambique, all sorts of countries, and they have students coming to this one university. Why? Because it means there are Muslims there. People who want to learn their religion. Islam spread. And that is the sacrifice that the Prophet ﷺ made. And the Prophet ﷺ doesn't want anything from us. He doesn't want from us money, doesn't want from us wealth, doesn't want from us property, doesn't want anything. But he wants us to follow his footsteps. Why? Because when we follow him, we will have paradise by Allah's permission. Allah, he just wants good for us. He wants us to have that reward. But there is only one path to that reward. And that path sometimes is difficult. It is sometimes hard. The Prophet ﷺ one day, he went to the graveyard in Medina, Al-Baqi'. Right? You've heard of Al-Baqi'? Baqi' is the graveyard of Medina by the masjid, where many of the companions, many of the great scholars, they were buried there. Even till today, the people who died in Medina, they're buried in the graveyard of Baqiyah. The Prophet ﷺ went to Baqiyah one day and he was with his companions. And as he went into the graveyard, he said to them, I long to meet my brothers and sisters. I want to meet my brothers and sisters. The companions were shocked. They were amazed by this. They said, O Messenger of Allah, aren't we your brothers and sisters? Right, we're here, you've met us. Aren't we your brothers? The Prophet ﷺ said, no. You are my companions. My brothers and sisters are those people who will come after me and believe in me even though they never met me. That is the definition and description of being a brother or a sister to the Prophet ﷺ. Those people who lived in his time, they have a special status, and that is that they were companions. They were Sahaba. That is a special status for them. But the brothers and sisters are those people who never met him, never spoke to him, never saw him, but still they believe in him and they follow his sunnah, they follow his path, they follow his role model. That is the definition of being a brother or a sister to the Prophet ﷺ. But the Prophet ﷺ also told us that it would be difficult to do. Told us that it is hard to do. He told us that we have to be careful in the way that we follow him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In another hadith, the companions one day, they asked the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they said, O Messenger of Allah, on the day of judgment, where can we meet you? When will, because the companions always wanted to be reunited with the Prophet, and they knew that he would die, they would die. When will we be together again, O Messenger of Allah? So the Prophet ﷺ said, you will meet me on the day of judgment by the Hawd, my pond. Right? The Hawd is the pond of the Prophet ﷺ. It is outside of Jannah, before Jannah. And it is the water of the pond though comes from the river Al-Kawthar in Jannah. So same water that flows into the pond. And the Prophet ﷺ described the water of this pond and he said that it is whiter than milk, sweeter than honey, more fragrant than musk. Whosoever drinks from it will never be thirsty again. Because we know the day of judgment is what? A day of extreme thirst. People will be sweating, people will be extremely hot, there will be no relief, there is no shade except Allah's shade. People will be extremely thirsty. But whoever drinks from this pond just once will never ever be thirsty again. Never be thirsty again. The Prophet ﷺ said that on the banks of this pond, around the pond on the banks, there will be so many cups, they are like the twinkling stars of the sky. So many cups. And each time one person comes from the ummah, from our ummah, they will come to the pond, the Prophet ﷺ will take a cup, he will take water, and he will serve it to his followers. So we will not serve him. We are not the ones giving him water. We are not the ones serving him. He will serve us. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. As a way of honoring his followers. Imagine that honor, that prestige. That he is the one who gives you that cup of water. And that water you drink from it, you're never thirsty again. But as he is standing there and people are coming, there will be a group of people who will come and the angels will push them away. Turn them back. The Prophet ﷺ will see this and he will say, Ummati, Ummati. These people are also from my ummah. They're my followers. But the angels will say, you don't know what they did to your religion after you died. Meaning what? They changed your religion. They innovated in your religion. They didn't follow your path. They did things that were foreign from Islam. Not part of our religion. You don't find them in the Quran. You don't find them in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. They made things up and twisted things. They changed your religion. So the Prophet ﷺ will say, take them away from. Take them away from. They won't be allowed to come to the Hawd. Meaning what? The Prophet ﷺ wants us to follow his path. The path to Jannah is when you follow the path of the Prophet ﷺ. If he tells us to do something, we do it. If he tells us not to do something, we don't do it. Why? Because we know that is the path to Allah's mercy and to his forgiveness and to his reward and Jannah. That's all that the Prophet ﷺ wants. But at the same time, it is hard to do. It's difficult to do. And the Prophet ﷺ knew that it would be difficult. Because in another hadith, he said, ﷺ, holding on to the religion will be like holding on to red hot coals. Imagine, you have your hand out, and I take a red hot coal from the fire, and I place it in the palm of your hand. What's your first reaction? What would you do? You drop it, right? You throw it away. Because it's burning, it's hot. To hold on to it takes sacrifice. So when the Prophet ﷺ tells us, for example, that we have to dress a certain way, that we have to pray, that we have to give charity, that we have to do certain things and stay away from certain things. That takes sacrifice because our desires go against it. Shaitan tells us to do the opposite. In the morning when your alarm clock goes for Fajr, what would you want to do rather? Go to sleep, right? Especially if it's cold, your bed is comfortable, you have a nice mattress, it's warm. You don't want to get out, you don't want to make wudu, you don't want to pray, but when you do so, it is sacrifice. That is what you call sacrifice. The money that you work so hard to make, all of this money that you make together and you have and everyone has expenses, right? Everyone could use that money in other ways. But then you're told give charity, help the da'wah, call people to Islam, help the poor, help the needy, help the homeless. And you give that money that you worked so hard for. And the money that you could use for your children and for the education or for your holidays or for your car or for your house, and you give it willingly. You give it for Allah's sake. That's why Allah says in the Quran, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You will never attain piety until you spend from what you love. You give the best of what you have, you give it away. That is a sign of piety because there is sacrifice. Right? Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu came, what did he do? All of his wealth he gave. All of his wealth. Umar came and he gave half of his wealth. Uthman came and he gave so much over and over again that the Prophet ﷺ said, nothing will harm you after today. Meaning, you will never be punished. Doesn't matter what happens, you won't be punished. Because they sacrificed so much, did so much, gave so much. And that is part of the sacrifice. And so that is also a testament of love. Loving the Prophet ﷺ is not just a claim that we make. Loving the Prophet ﷺ means that we follow him. Action, right? We have to implement it. We have to follow his footsteps. We have to learn about him. Because you can't follow him if you don't know what he told you to follow in the first place. You don't know. You don't know his sunnah. You don't know what he said do, what he said don't do. You have to learn. You have to learn his seerah, his life, his character. You have to learn what he said to do and not to do. And so when you learn everything, you want to know, what did the Prophet ﷺ do? How did he pray? How did he fast? How did he make wudu? How did he interact with others? How did he behave with his family, with his children? All of this you learn and you take on board. That is the sign of loving the Prophet ﷺ. And those two things are the first point. When you love Allah and you love the Prophet ﷺ more than anything and everything else. A true love by learning about them, by following them, by sacrificing what you would rather do because they want you to do something else, and knowing that the path that they gave to you is better for you ultimately. In the long run, it is more beneficial, more rewarding. That is the path to salvation, to success, and to Jannah. And when you do that, that is the first of the three steps. Loving Allah, loving the Prophet ﷺ more than you love everything and anything else. Barakallahu feekum wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. I think one of the best things we did in this session was saying salawat upon the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So Jazakallah khair for this beautiful lecture, Shaykh. And hopefully again, we finished our two talks. So again, I asked this question yesterday again, I'm going to say it again. We hope that it really energized our Emaan. Again, just to go back to the root of the program is just to energize our Emaan and to build that stronger connection with Allah. And now we can take about 2-3 questions, if that's okay with the Shaykh. Jazakallah khair. 2-3 questions if you have, again, to go back to the topic, and then we'll break. So, anybody, brothers or sisters? Again, I do have 1 or 2 questions, but I'll ask the audience first. And their brains, of course, it's too cold. Yes.
For those people who were pushed away, you still think of them as they will still be able to enter Jannah at the end?
So those people who are pushed away in the hadith of the pond, are they still entering into Jannah? They are still Muslims because the Prophet ﷺ recognizes them as Muslims, and he says to the angels, Ummati, they are from my ummah, they are from my followers, meaning that the Prophet ﷺ recognizes them. What it means though, as we know, is when we sin, when we do something wrong, then our reward always decreases, or some good is always taken away from us, or we are punished for the sins that we accumulate. So likewise, these group of people, they are prevented from some of these rewards and some of this good. Ultimately, what will happen to them, that is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah will judge them according to that. Some of them perhaps will be forgiven, some of them may be punished. Allah knows best. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Thank you, Shaykh, for your sharing the knowledge. Definitely, I love my parents because I remember they made many sacrifices while bringing me up. And at the same time, when we see this love evolves over the period of time, there are thousands of reasons why should I love God, or why should I love Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So you mentioned a couple of things, that love means what Prophet said and what he did. So we need to follow that. So this meaning of love in Prophet, it differs from person to person. So how should I know that I embody that love in my daily life? No doubt there are rewards hereafter for me of that love. So what is there in this world? Because we need to make the balance between deen and dunya. Then how can we make that meaning embodied in our practices? And second thing is, what else I can expect out of this love in this world?
So in terms of how do we practically love the Prophet ﷺ, how do we embody that love within our lives? One of the most important thing in attaining this love is studying the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And by studying his life, you will also learn the lives of the companions, right? Because the life of the Prophet ﷺ is not just a biography. It's not just a book that you read that is only about him. It is in his daily practical interactions with his community. How he deals with the elderly, with the young, with the women, with the children, with the poor, with the needy. And these are our daily life things, right? When you go to work, what do you do? When you are with family, what do you do? When you're with different parts of the community, what do you do? In times of rest, how do you do? So the Prophet ﷺ mentioned all of this. And it's there all within his sunnah and within his seerah. So practically speaking, on an everyday level, whether it's our job, whether it's our family, whether it's when we're on holiday or traveling, all of this is contained within the sunnah. So when you learn about this, it helps you to have that balance as well. Because as we know, Islam is a balanced religion. Islam doesn't say to us, for example, that we just become, for example, like monks and we only worship God, we don't work, we don't have families, we don't have a living. Islam tells us to balance between the two. And the Prophet ﷺ used to balance the same thing as well. His companions would have that balance. They would work, they would earn livings, but at the same time they would spend time learning about their religion as well. So by studying, you have the balance between the two. I will just give you one example. The example of Umar radiallahu anhu. Umar, as we know, had a job, he had work, he had a business and so on. But at the same time, he wants to learn and he wants to be with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what did he do? He had a friend. And they made an agreement that they would alternate days working and being with the Prophet sallallahu. So one day Umar is at work, his friend is with the Prophet sallallahu. And the next day, his friend goes to work and Umar stays with the Prophet sallallahu. And every evening they meet, and the one who was with the Prophet ﷺ, he tells the other one what happened. Anything happened, what took place, so that the other person doesn't miss out of that knowledge. He doesn't miss anything from that knowledge that was taken from that day. And that shows you the level of dedication that they had, of how much they wanted to learn. It is a balance between the two, but sometimes when we speak about balance, we say balance, but we actually go to an extreme. So we say we have to balance our work with our religion, our family with our religion and so on. But actually what we do is that means that we don't actually learn about our religion at all. Maybe once a month, once a year, we have a conference or something. But the rest of the time is, the balance isn't there. A true balance is when you actually do a balance on both every day. And so Islam is a very easy, simple religion. But you have to work and understand that balance. And one of the best ways is to do it from the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the more that you learn, the more you will see how obvious it is and how easy it also becomes. And your second question, I forgot. You forgot.
Yes,
So that means no doubt there is
Yes.
ajr in
Yes.
hereafter.
One of the benefits in this life.
Benefits in my life.
One of the greatest benefits in this life is that you will have Allah's love. Allah says in the Quran, قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهُ. Say if you truly love Allah, then follow the Prophet ﷺ, and Allah will love you and He will forgive you for your sins. By following the Prophet ﷺ, it is one of the greatest ways of attaining Allah's love. And when Allah loves you, what does that mean? It means that Allah gives you His care, He gives you His protection, He gives you His forgiveness, His mercy. Everything in your life will be good for you. And one of the best ways is by following the Prophet ﷺ.
One more question if anybody wants to ask. Sisters including.
What do you ask?
Huh?
You said you have questions.
I do have a question. So Shaykh, like, I mean, you explain about loving the Prophet ﷺ, and no doubt the best of the people who loved him was the Sahaba. So sometimes, you know, we in the community we sometimes let the love of the Rasul go to some higher level than Allah, and I'm sure there's some hadith about this as well. Is there a limit of our love to the Rasul?
So our love for the Prophet ﷺ is greater than any other love, except for the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does that mean? It means that we never elevate the Prophet ﷺ above his station. So the Prophet ﷺ is a messenger of Allah, and he is one of the creation of Allah. He is not a God. So he doesn't know the unseen. He doesn't have the attributes of a God. He's not all seeing, all hearing, all knowing the unseen, knowing the hidden, knowing the future. All of these things, they are not attributes of humans. They are attributes of a God. And the Prophet ﷺ himself used to say, and there are many hadith to this effect, don't go to extremes in me like the Christians did with Jesus. What did the Christians do with Jesus? They elevated him to the level of God, right? And so the Prophet ﷺ said, don't do this with me. Rather, I am Allah's servant and his messenger. And so that is the level that we have to keep the Prophet ﷺ at. When we start to go above this level, then that is when we are in the danger of falling into the realm of shirk, right? And we start associating him and giving him powers and things that he didn't have. And Allah Azza wa Jalla says clearly in the Quran, say to them, إِنَّمَا أَنَا بَشَرٌ. Say to them, I am just a human. So he is an ordinary human, but Allah gave him certain blessings and certain miracles that others don't have. But those miracles and blessings are still in the realm of humanity. They don't elevate him to the level of being God.
Can I add another one?
Sure, that's fine.
Just to add to what Brother Ali was saying, so probably the way we love was also part of our ibadah. So sometimes people have their own way of this ibadah, right? Like for example, celebrating birthday and so on. So probably we need to also specify that how to show the love. And
so the best way to show love for the Prophet ﷺ is in the way that he told us to love him. And the way that he told us to love him is best seen in the way that was demonstrated by his companions. It doesn't matter how much you love the Prophet ﷺ, how much you say you love him. There is no one that loved him more than Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali. No one that loved him more than his own wives, Aisha, or his daughter Fatima, or his grandchildren Ahsan and Hussein. There is no one that can love him more than those people love the Prophet ﷺ. So the best way to see that love is to see the way that they loved him. And when you look at their love for the Prophet ﷺ, it was a love of respect and honor, and it was a love of following him, of following his sunnah and following his path. So when you try to love him in a way that he didn't say love me, that he didn't say do this, or he didn't say do it in this way, or he didn't legislate something, and then you try to love him in that way, it shows that there is a problem with your love. Because true love is also about obedience, right? If you love someone and that person says, yes, I don't want you to do that, and then you go and do it, shows that you don't actually love them. If you honor your parents and you love your parents, but you know your parents don't like something, they hate something, and then you go and do that thing, then obviously they're going to be upset. Just common sense. Likewise with the Prophet ﷺ, he told us the way to love him. His companions demonstrated that type of love. And that's why, again, it always comes back down to the issue of learning. The more that you read, the more that you learn, the more that you seek knowledge about this, the more that you will understand the way to do something and the way not to do something.
Okay, so we'll stop here, inshallah, and around 2 o'clock, 2:15. Hope everybody can come back again for the last
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
2:15.
Okay, 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock. Then they'll come at 2:15, right? So 2 o'clock, inshallah. Inshallah, hope you'll all come back, and please spread the message, inshallah, because there will be one more lecture tomorrow, inshallah, as well. But hopefully we can come together and bring more people as well, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for your time. May Allah accept. Barakallah feek. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. 1:15 is the Iqama in Goa.
My Allah is the one, the one, the one.